this week's subject is grieving. And so I just wanted to kind of prelude my talk with a couple of comments first, and then I'll say something about grief. And the first thing I want to say, I'm pretty sure I didn't check this out with you, so I hope this is okay with you. But, Reverend Lynn and I go back a long ways. In fact, it's so long I can't now remember exactly when we met. Maybe 2002, 2003, something like that, down at Tassajara. And my memory is someone over dinner said, "Oh, you're gay and you're gay. Let's go have tea." So
not about me, someone else.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And that started a kind of friendship that we would sort of sequester and find a place in one of the cabins and sit and have a talk. And I don't know if you remember this, but I sobbed through at least half of those talks. Like Reverend then, well, she was not a reverend then. I don't even know if you were lay ordained then, frankly. But
2003, I was.
We would sit in these, kind of poorly lit cabins. And she'd say, "How are you?" And I'd say, "I'm so busy, I can hardly stand it." And then she'd say, "Well, what else is going on?" And it was that depth of, really, how are you? And eventually I would be in tears and I wouldn't even know why exactly. But the kind of grief of the like wanting to see the self and wanting to settle with the self was so deep with me, and she had a way of kind of bringing it out. She wouldn't let me, I wanted to like BS her and all that kind of stuff, and I just couldn't do it. And maybe some of that was being at the monastery, certainly. But I was just remembering that you were that person even 22 years ago. So, and I think that's who we can be for all of us in Sangha, because all of us have some kind of grief that's going on in our lives, always. Maybe it's not real proximate to us with our family, but that when that does happen, it becomes a really important, all-consuming kind of issue that brings up our family histories, our relationships with our family, relationships with friends. And in some ways, it's a really, it's a very important part of practice, or has been for me. And this is one of the ways I think that for me, and I was rather just like singly trained in Soto Zen, the chants, the rituals, the ceremonies have always been really important to me because they, in a very nonverbal way, sort of make the breath and the grief move around in the body. And I think generally, at least for me, holding it in has not been very helpful for me. One of my friends who I always considered very senior to me and passed away of a brain tumor, I don't know, 2004 or something like that. And he used to say to me, "Crying's good." Just like that. That was his Zen teaching. Crying's good. And this guy was in a tremendous amount of discomfort because he had this brain tumor, and according to the doctors, he was getting better. And 3 days after he was told he was getting better, he passed away. And in some ways, I think that contradictory message, like you're actually improving, but then you die, was really jarring for me to see that happen. I also happened to be the person who was with him when he passed, and boy, we just started doing ceremonies every day. We did the 49-day once a week ceremonies, culminating in the 49th day one, and in Japan as Reverend Arai says, the 1 year anniversary is also a marker. And even though I'm Japanese American, raised here, and my family was not Buddhist, they were Marxist and atheist, if anything. Um, but I have done those ceremonies for my friends and extended family who have passed away. And it's been a very, I don't know, maybe I think of them as markers for processing and kind of slowly being with a person as they move through the bardo. Um, I don't mean this necessarily as a plug for Zen because, although it's been really deeply figurative for me in my life, and I think, for me as a Japanese American, do I want to say this? Yeah, I do want to say this. I think, among Asian Americans, I was talking about this in a talk I gave recently. There's more, a greater proportion and kind of preponderance of depression among certain age groups and certain ethnic groups in the Asian American population. And I think some of the rituals have been really helpful for me to kind of move that affect and feeling around. And I have, off and on in my life felt like I've been depressed. I mean, I sat in front of a desk for 12 hours a day as a professor, so that's depressing. And but I've also known, um, I was an Asian American history person and Asian American studies faculty member, sociologist, that this is actually a really important part of Asian American families, even today. And it's different today than it was when I was in my 20s, but nonetheless, it is still there. And again, kind of moving the breath around was really helpful for me. And I think my own Zen practice was really, in some ways, animated by trying to think about and process the different kinds of grief that maybe we all have in our lives. Um, is that enough of a wrap? We could have some conversation, or you want me to talk more? Yeah.
It's your seat.
Well, I'll just say one other thing, and that is that when I did a monastic training period with Reverend Leon, were you Reverend then? I don't even know. No, yeah. I sobbed all the way through that. It's not really possible to sob really for 90 days, but I did. And, half the time I had no idea what I was crying about. I mean, yeah, there was a fair amount of death in my family and among family, friends, and so on. But it was also this, I don't know what, I mean, I don't really want to call it trauma because that's not what I felt it was at the time. But it was like getting to be with myself for the first time in a really deep way in a long time. And so maybe for those of us who are not actively in that place with a family member who has died or a friend who has died, there is that circulating in some of us, at least for me, that was true. And it's really interesting now, kind of like, I think if I were to walk into Tassajara, I would cry because it just evokes that part of my own past that made it possible for me to pursue this practice in the way that I have. And don't get me wrong, I haven't always been happy in this practice. It's not an easy thing, but but it's good to have friends on the road who sit with you while you go through these things. And Reverend Leanne and I were having a discussion about something last week, and you said something that really stuck with me, which is something like the Dharma is always and already perfect. And as much as we might complain about or be concerned about this or that having to do with sanghas and dharma. The work is to study and practice, work on the rituals in which you see and feel that perfection. So why don't I stop there?